Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to talk about Doctor Who. And my question is, when did Doctor Who stop feeling like Doctor Who? Again, this is a subjective question that's going to vary from person to person. And I'm going to list several points that I have noticed as to why current Doctor Who doesn't really feel like Doctor Who to me in a lot of ways. And it's been a progressive thing. I've been thinking about this video for a while. So we're going to talk about several different reasons why Doctor Who doesn't feel like Doctor Who to me anymore. And of course, I'll be curious to hear what you guys think. The first thing is going to be the visuals. Now, we know classic Doctor Who was done on a budget. A very, very low budget. It's kind of what classic Who is known for. Whereas the modern series, of course, has better special effects. Progressively, as the modern series has gone, Series 1 does look a little dated. Series 2 looks a little dated now. Whereas, excuse me, the Matt Smith era, they really got a bump in quality of the visuals. Same thing with Capaldi. And the current Whittaker era looks far more cinematic than Doctor Who has ever had. It does look cinematic is definitely the word I use. It looks a lot more cinematic with much better effects that look very big budget compared to previous versions of Doctor Who. But for me, that's a problem because for me, the cheap looking sets and the cheap effects are part of what gives Doctor Who its charm. It's to me that's part of Doctor Who's DNA because classic Doctor Who, all 26 seasons of it, really do have that lo-fi look to it, that low budget look. For the most part, every now and then they do something that blows you away, like that opening shot from Trial of a Time Lord. That's impressive. But for me, as someone who more and more I realize I prefer classic Doctor Who over modern Doctor Who as a whole. I mean, classic Doctor Who has its ups and downs, modern Doctor Who has its ups and downs. But as a whole, I prefer the feel of classic Doctor Who. I like the cheap sets. I like using my imagination to make it work and my willing suspension of disbelief. Usually, it doesn't always pull it off. Invasion of Time is pretty bad with its budget. And Power of Kroll is as well. But I like early in modern Doctor Who because some of the creatures still kind of have like a legacy carryover for that. Like the Slitheen. The Slitheen look like a classic Doctor Who villain. With the cheap little looking outfits they wear and their design, they look like something that would fit right in Classic Who. I like that. The idea of the statues in Blink are really good. I could have seen something like that popping up in classic Doctor Who. Probably not as effectively because camera angles are better these days. But the actual concept of the Weeping Angels would have worked really well in classic Who. So I enjoy a lot of that. It's as the show has progressed, especially from the Matt Smith era on, it seems to have gotten away from kind of having legacy stuff looking kind of cheaper from the classic series. And it still looks good. I actually really like a lot of the effects in the Matt and Capaldi era, but it's really with Whittaker's, with that more cinematic look. It doesn't feel like Doctor Who to me, the way it looks too good. It looks way too good. I would rather watch something from the classic series with its walls that look like they're, if you bump them, they'll wobble. Or the TARDIS console's kind of shimmying as it's going up and down. To me, that's just part of Doctor Who. It has that lo-fi look. It's kind of like, whereas I prefer the original Star Trek look over, Discovery's look, even though Discovery's supposed to be 10 years before the original series, which doesn't make sense, but that's another story. I prefer the lo-fi look of the original Trek series. I like that. So visuals are a big part of it for me. I have a hard time connecting with the last few years of Doctor Who because it doesn't look like Doctor Who, and because of that it doesn't feel like Doctor Who. I would much rather go back and watch like a lot of the classic Who stories I've been able to see for the first time that I'd never been able to see before. A lot of the first Doctor stories, or I got to see Frontios recently. I got to see The Time Warrior recently, and I much prefer that classic Who budget look that it has. That's Doctor Who for me. Another thing is the music, but I'm just going to touch on that for a quick second. The Doctor Who music kind of changes. I really think the best era of music probably actually was with Murray Gold. Murray has this great habit of creating very memorable music that sticks in your head. Like some of classic Who I can keep in my head. Like I love the Logopolis Regeneration theme. That kind of sticks in my head. But a lot of it doesn't. Even though I like a lot of the incidental music in classic Who, it's not something I can hum. Whereas Murray Gold's music, I can hum probably a dozen of his themes in my head at any time. But the current guy, I can't do that. I'm not saying his music's bad. It fits the scenes a lot of times, but it's not memorable to me. And I much prefer Murray's memorable music. So just touching on that slightly, that's one thing I think I like better, even about the modern shows. I love Murray Gold's music. I'd love to have him come back. Another thing is something Vera from Council of Geeks pointed out once a while back. It's always stuck with me. Is how the Doctor in Classic Who is more like Spider-Man, whereas in the Doctor in Modern Who is more like Superman. In Classic Who, Spider-Man, very low-key, going around helping people, helping on a smaller scale. That's really what it is. Spider-Man's much more on a smaller scale, just kind of helping out, doing what the Doctor does. Occasionally there'd be those big events where he'd save the universe, kind of like in Logopolis, but usually it was more low-key stuff going on, and not everybody knew who he was. He was just a stranger passing through. Whereas in the modern show, the Doctor is a legend woven throughout history, and everyone knows who the Doctor is. The Doctor, we get that word from you, everything's the Doctor. The Doctor is, the savior of everybody. It's the legend of the Doctor. The very first question ever written was, "Hello, sweetie," somebody talking to the Doctor. It's always the Doctor. The first question ever was Doctor Who. It's more like Superman. The Doctor is too important, too involved. If it wasn't for the Doctor, the universe would have ended so long ago. It's too much. The Doctor is too important. I prefer the low-key approach of the Doctor in the classic series. The Doctor shouldn't be vital to the survival of the universe all the time. And that leads into my third point, which is the modern show has become just too over the top. Even in Russell's era, his season finales kept getting progressively bigger. Stuff coming in from other universes. The Master subjugating the Earth and having to rewind time to fix that. The Series 4 one, not just our reality threatened by the reality bomb, but every reality, which is a very Davros Dalek thing to do, to be fair. But each one seemed like it was trying to trump the one before it. Too over the top. To look at Flux. The whole universe is being threatened. Planets blowing up. We see the scene when planets are just being destroyed. Also, I don't think the Doctor ever fixed that, so most of the universe is still destroyed. But, I don't like the show being that over the top, where, the whole universe is threatened again, or every universe is threatened again. Oh no, thank goodness the Doctor's here to save a little of it. That plays in, too, with the visuals. Now that they can do so much more with the visuals, it makes the over-the-topness look even more over the top. It's kind of like some of the Marvel movies. There's so much CGI stuff going on that I'm tuning out. I personally found the latest Doctor Strange movie to be good, but not good. Like a 6 out of 10 good. There's just too many effects going on at this point. I find Doctor Who like that too. It's too over the top, and part of that is it's effects driven. I get a little burned out with all of that going on. Everything with the Time Lords being dead, the Time Lords being back, the Time Lords being dead again. Make up your minds. The next point on the list is we're going to continue talking about the Doctor, and that is going from Superman to being Space Jesus. The whole timeless children nonsense. Now they've made the Doctor Space Jesus. I really hate this. Much like when they made Rey a Palpatine, it basically tells you, well, if you're not, it all has to do with how you're born. It's all had to do with birth. If you're not nobly born or something, get ready for a life of mediocrity. Hi, were you born? I'm from Mississippi. I'm used to not being super well off. Hi, were you born from a not well off family? Get used to a lot of that in your life because you're not a chosen one. You know, one of the things I've always loved about the Doctor in Classic Who is the Doctor is not even a good Time Lord. Like, by Time Lord standards, he's not even an average Time Lord. He's a pretty bad Time Lord. You know, like when Romana first meets him in the Ribos operation, and she's talking about her score, and he's like, am I supposed to be impressed by that? Well, it's better than squeaking by with her, and he's like, those records are classified. You get the impression he's not the best Time Lord. And, you know, I love the fact he's in fear of his own people. He tries to avoid them. He doesn't like them interfering with his life. And we see this all the way really through The Deadly Assassin, but especially in the War Games. You look at how panicked the second Doctor is and how worried he is when he has to call them in. As soon as he calls them in, he is trying to get the hell out of there. He's got, but I have to leave. We have to go. Come on. And you see why, because the Time Lords are written so much better in the classic series, especially early on, like the War Games. Best appearance of the Time Lords ever, War Games. When he's trying to get away and they're literally slowing down time around him, and then when he does get away, they are still controlling the TARDIS and breaking down the defenses to where he ends up home. And he does not want to be there. He wants to get away. To me, that's the Doctor. That's who the Doctor is. Not this person who will slam a door in Rassilon's face or the General's face. I want to talk to the head. Well, I'm the General. Ugh. You know, hell, Ben is bad on so many levels. But the fact the Doctor is just like, Rassilon, give me my coffee. You know, that's not the Doctor. He's not supposed to be Space Jesus. I'm the Doctor. All right, Gallifrey, listen up. That's not how it's supposed to work. You know, I don't like the idea that the Doctor is responsible for the Time Lords being able to regenerate and them learning all of the time travel. And if it wasn't for the Doctor, we wouldn't have the Time Lords. And if it wasn't for the Doctor keeping everything together, it would have ended long ago. Much like in Twice Upon a Time. Maybe it's just a bloke, you know, running around holding everything together. Fuck me. Superman to Space Jesus. Look. I'm from Mississippi. I was born and raised in Mississippi. You know, where every third building is a church, Mississippi. I'm fed up with real Jesus. The last thing I want to deal with is Space Jesus. Okay? So, yeah, I don't like I don't like the Timeless Children thing, the Doctor being from another universe, because why? Why break 50-something, you know, almost 60 years of canon just to do that? Well, actually, I know why they did it. That's politics, but it's still very irksome. I don't like the idea of the Doctor being better than everyone else just because of her birth, or his birth, or how he was born. It doesn't make sense to me. Why can't the Doctor just be another Time Lord that decided to leave? Like the second Doctor said, because I was bored. You know, a whole universe out there to see and explore. That's the only backstory the Doctor needs, and we'll get to that. We'll circle back to that, actually. Next one on here is politics over story. I don't like how modern Doctor Who puts the importance of its political message over its story. Now, this is not to say Classic Who didn't do politics. Classic Who did indeed do politics. But politics in Classic Doctor Who never took precedent over the quality of the story. The story was always the number one thing. Even if they had a message to tell that was politically driven, they always made sure the story was good. A perfect example of this is in The Green Death. The Green Death is not subtle about its political message, of which it has multiple political messages. Of course, there's the toxic waste stuff, there's the needing more natural food stuff, and there's the dangerous self-reliance on technology that's very prophetic, actually, when you think about it. And how deadly that can be, being that self-reliant on technology. There's a lot of political things going on in The Green Death. But you know what the number one great thing about The Green Death is? The story. The story is phenomenal. It's one of the best companion departures. Also, the effects in it look pretty good, aside from some CSO work and that flying insect. I like the fact Benton gets some stuff to do in it. The third Doctor is great in it. I think the guest cast do a good job in it. It's a well-directed, well-written story, while still being political. Doctor Who does that well. There are several of them, and there's several of them that, you know, that I probably don't even catch the politics in, just because I'm not British and I'm not aware of what was going on in the UK at the time. and that are far more subtle. It's in the modern show when it basically is shoving the politics in your face, like, hey, do you get our message? Do you get what we're trying to say? Don't you know what we're trying to say? Yes, pollution is bad. You look at Praxius, which isn't a bad episode, but it's a very forgettable episode where plastic is killing the planet, plastic is killing the planet, plastic is killing the planet. Yes, I get it. But at the same time, the story's not written well. Remember the two girls who are out camping, and one of them gets killed, and her friend sees her gets killed, and she's like, oh no! And then like a minute later, she's fine, and it never comes up again? Man, is she a sociopath? How do you do that? My friend died. Oh, look, cookies. You know, and that's just bad writing. It's a very forgettable episode. It does some neat things. The way it handles its homosexual relationship in it is phenomenally good. But the story itself takes a back seat to pushing its political point about pollution and plastic. You look at Orphan 55, which really gets ruined with that on-the-nose speech at the end where Whitaker's talking right to the camera. Because you can save this planet, and it cuts to the creature. And when it cuts to the creature, I'm just like... And the funny thing is, Orphan 55, while being a bad episode, has good moments in it. It has things I like. I have a whole video talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of Orphan 55. I actually like the fact when it's revealed they're on Earth. I didn't see that coming. And as cliche as that is, I probably should have, but I didn't see it coming. It did a good job hiding that and revealing that from me. But because it's so heavy-handed with this message, it's like a Looney Tunes cartoon with a rubber mallet. You get it? You get it? You get it now? Do you get it? Do you understand? Do you get yes. I bloody get it. That's the problem with modern Doctor Who. So many times. Hey, do you get it? Vincent and the Doctor's about depression. Do you get it? Yes. That's exactly why I watch Doctor Who. I want to be depressed more. Let's watch some Doctor Who. Let's watch that Vincent and the Doctor episode. And most of you guys who watch my channel, you know I can't stand that episode. Why do I want to watch a show about depression? Real life exists for that. I watch Doctor Who to get away from that. Doctor Who is supposed to be a fun show that's a nice escapism for people. They don't want to deal with their real world problems in that, or else they'd be out dealing with the real world. So focus on making a good story. If that's my message to Russell T. Davies, have a good political message, but focus on making a good story first. There's nothing wrong with being political. Original Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation were political, but they usually did it in a pretty good way, especially the original series. I love the episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. Very important lesson while being in a very good story. What's next on the list? Classic villains getting ruined or overused or made less. The classic villains in Doctor Who, modern Doctor Who, get used too much. The Daleks, the Cybermen, and the Master especially. Let's tackle all of them. Let's start with the Cybermen. The Cybermen get treated like crap in the modern show. To the point to where most of the time if the Cybermen show up, I'm like, the Master must be around somewhere holding their leash. Why are the Cybermen the Master's bitch so much in the modern show? There are very few times the Cybermen have been effective in the modern show. The Age of Steel two-parter where they first showed up was pretty good. I like them in the series finale two-parter, even though they get spanked by the Daleks, because one, it's just nice to see them fight finally. Two, it shows how threatening the Daleks are by comparison. I actually do enjoy that. And the shock of a Cyberman story turning into a Dalek story, I didn't see coming, and I like that. The shock value, that's good. But pretty much every time after, they have been ruined for the most part. World Enough and Time does a good job with them. It kind of loses it in the Doctor Falls, because I would have liked to have seen more of the Mondasian Cybermen instead of seeing them jump all the way to the current version of them at that time in the show. So they get set up really well in World Enough and Time, and they're okay in the Doctor Falls. They're not bad. They get a little Deus Machina at the end, but they're okay. And then I really like them in The Haunting of Villa Diodati with the Lone Cyberman. That's a great take on the Cybermen. But then they kind of get bullshit again on in the two parts after that, where they get Deus Machina destroyed and once again made the Master's bitch. The Cybermen need to be retired. I mean, look at classic Doctor Who. Yeah, they got used a lot in the Troughton era, but do you know how many times the third Doctor fought the Cybermen? Do you know how many times Tom Baker in his legendary 7-year run as the Doctor fought the Cybermen? To recap, do you know how many times in the 70s that we really saw the Cybermen? Not counting the brief time in Carnival and the brief time in Mind of Evil. But when they were actually really in a story in the entire 70s, the greatest decade of Doctor Who in my opinion. And then they showed up a little more in the 80s. We had them in like Earthshock, Attack of the Cybermen, and Silver Nemesis. And the 5 Doctors. We had like 4 times in 10 years. That's not bad. And they're utilized pretty well in those stories. Although I haven't seen Attack of the Cybermen yet. Let's move on to the Master. The Master shows up too much. The Master shows up way too much in the modern show. And I like Missy a lot. I think she had a great arc just for that to get changed with Sasha showing up. Now, I don't mind Sasha's master, but I hate the fact that Sasha's master pretty much undoes all of Missy's work. Unless, of course, you go with the fan theory that he is before Missy. And I know there's some Big Finish audio that kind of establishes the timeline and that he is after Missy and how that works. But, you know, the canon of Big Finish is up in the air. Some more than others. So I personally like the fan theory that he's before Missy, because it's odd to me that she would have such a change of heart and be coming around and want to stand with the Doctor and then suddenly be back to the evil Master that wants him dead. Although learning about the Timeless Children stuff could have twisted him pretty hard, I guess. But the Master shows up to me and isn't utilized as well. I'm not a big fan of Sim's Master. Depending on which version of him you're seeing, because each time he shows up, he plays the character pretty different, actually. His Doctor has a character arc too, I guess, or his Master has a character arc. Whereas in the classic show, aside from the Third Doctor era, he's used pretty sparingly. He's in a lot of the Third Doctor era. I mean, he's kind of the season 8 gimmick, which he's great. Delgado's amazing. But then you take a break from that and you have him, you know, how many times did Tom Baker fight the Master? Well, I guess technically 3. But 2 of those were his last 2 stories. I mean, we have him in Deadly Assassin, and then you have like a 5-year gap before he shows up in Keeper of Traken in Legopolis. He does show up a bit in the 5th Doctor's era, I will admit. But then I think he's only in like one, well no, he's in several of the 6 Doctors. So he does show up a lot in the 80s with Anthony Ainley back. But the 7th Doctor only fought him once, which is a shame, because I think him and Sylvester would have been, I would have loved to have seen more of that. So yeah, he shows up a bit in the 80s too, but I still feel like he's overused in the modern show. And then the Daleks need a break. I know supposedly there is, you know, that thing about they have to show up once a year. It's part of the contract with the nation estate. Now, I never actually know if that's real or if that's just a myth. Either way, they really need to try to restrict them, because the Daleks get way overused. I actually like the fact Chibnall hasn't used them a lot. He's kind of restricted them to the specials, to which all of the Dalek specials he's done have been good to one degree or another. I haven't thought any of them were bad, which is saying something. I actually really liked Eve of the Daleks with his Groundhog Day approach and his unique spin on that. And enjoyed Revolution as well. But the Daleks in modern Who, it's very obvious Moffat didn't know how to write them. I think his best one with them is probably Victory of the Daleks, which has its own flaws, but it's still pretty good. Into the Dalek is pretty good. Asylum of the Dalek I like, even though it's very flawed. It's got a lot of flaws to it, but I still enjoy it. It's fun. But it's very obvious to me he didn't know how to write the Daleks. I do think the best Dalek stories tend to be in Russell's era, with Dalek being good, the Series 2 finale being good, Journey's End being over the top, but good. And then I do like the Daleks Take Manhattan. It's not one of the best, but I can enjoy it. I like kind of what it tries to do. And it's got Andrew Garfield in it. That's interesting. I like the fact that aside from the first Doctor, the Daleks are used very sparingly in Classic Who. Troughton fought them twice in his first season, and then we never saw them again. And there's a huge gap. I mean, we don't see the Daleks from like 67 to like 72. There's like a 5-year gap with no Daleks. Think about that now, a 5-year gap with no Daleks. And I know because Terry Nation was trying to do stuff with them in America. But then, yeah, we had 3 Pertwee stories, 1 a year. Not bad. And then, of course, we have Genesis the next year. But even Tom Baker, in his 7-year run, only fought the Daleks twice. Genesis, which is amazing, and Destiny, which is Not so amazing, but still enjoyable. And then there's only 3 Dalek stories in the 80s. One for each Doctor. And they're all good. Because they're not overdone. Imagine if we had a Dalek... Imagine in the 80s if we'd had like 6 or 7 Dalek stories. They probably wouldn't have all been that good. But because they were used sparingly, and 5, 6, and 7 only had one story with them, they all turned out really well. They didn't get old. So all of these classic monsters need a rest. It's one of the reasons why, like, the Ice Warriors, I think, have thrived in modern Who. It's because the Ice Warriors have never been overused in classic or modern Who. I think they were in 4 stories in classic Who and 2 stories in modern Who. They're not overused. And when you do that with a classic villain that works better, the Great Intelligence, I think, is done really well in the modern show because he wasn't used much. Just like he wasn't used much in classic Who. So it's kind of like how the Weeping Angels have been kind of watered down because they've been used too much. Even in stories when they're not the main foe, like Revolution of the Daleks, why is a Weeping Angel in the prison? Well, we still have the costume, so, you know, or in Time of the Doctor when there's a Weeping Angel grabbing them. It doesn't need to be there. It waters them down when they get overused to where they've never been as effective as they are in Blink. Blink, they are amazing. And I like them in Flesh and Stone, and I even like them in part of Village of the Angels. If that didn't have all the Flux stuff going on in it, I think that'd be a pretty good story. That and the Doctor turning into an angel is stupid. Very stupid. But yeah, they're more effective when villains aren't being used all the time. It just goes to show how modern Who can even make modern Doctor Who monsters feel stale. It's just part of it. Stop ruining classic villains. Another one is too much backstory. I don't like the Timeless Children thing for a lot of reasons. One, because the only reason it was done was politics. I don't agree with that. But 2 is because sometimes you don't need to know an origin story. Sometimes that can ruin a character. You look at Michael Myers. Michael Myers in the Halloween movies, the early movies never really established why he is the way he is. And that's part of the interesting thing about that character. Besides the fact that could be real. Unlike Jason or Freddy, which are, you know, have supernatural elements, somebody like Michael Myers can be real, aside from the fact dude never seems to die. You know, that could be a real person who's just a nut. That's what makes Michael Myers scary to me. It's just a dude in a mask and like a whatever that jumpsuit thing he's wearing is called. And that's it. So that's what makes him scary. But I like not knowing why he's nuts and why he is the way he is. And the fact even Loomis can never figure out why he is the way he is. But then, like, the 6th movie, The Curse of Michael Myers, tried to explain why he is the way he is. And it's this supernatural curse thing, and it's stupid and dumb. And, you know, if you try to accept that into canon, it kind of ruins the character. It's the same thing with these prequels try to explain why somebody is the way they is. It doesn't work. And the Doctor is another reason why I don't need that. I don't need to know the Doctor is actually from another planet and everything exists because of him, because he's Space Jesus. Kind of ruins the mystery of the character. I like 60s Doctor Who when all we know is him and his granddaughter are traveling the universe and that they're cut off from their own planet. In Exile. That's pretty much it. The first Doctor and Susan have been exiled from their home planet. For me, it's really the second Doctor in the War Games Part 10 when he's explaining it to Jamie that really works for me. When he's talking about the Time Lords and he's like, you know, and they have all this infinite knowledge, but we don't ever use it for anything. And you know, I ran away. Well, why did you run away? Because this is also the story we found out. He stole the TARDIS. Why did you run away? Well, I was bored. Well, you were bored? Yes. Wasn't content with all that. With a whole galaxy out there to see and explore. And you just see the excitement in Troughton's voice, the way he says that line. Troughton is so good in this role. With a whole galaxy out there to see and explore. I love the way he delivers that. And that whole, why do they get mad about that? Well, Jamie, I do tend to get rather involved in things. You can say that again. I love that. That's the only backstory I need for the Doctor. That's the only origin story I need. Someone who got bored at home because his people never really use their power and do anything with it anymore. Unless it's something major. You know, and the whole galaxy's out there to see and have fun and explore and learn. And You just see how excited the second Doctor is just talking about it. A whole galaxy to explore. That's all of the origin story I need. That's it. The second Doctor's explanation in the TARDIS at the beginning of the War Games. That's it. I don't need anything else. It's unnecessary. It takes away from the character. And again, when you take that away from him and try to make him something else by, again, turning him into Space Jesus, that's basically saying, as I mentioned before, well, it's all determined at birth, you know. It's just like telling somebody, well, you're the son of a famous Hollywood star, so you're going to do all right in life, but, you know, you're the son of somebody that works in, you know, some mediocre, menial job, so that's just going to be your fate forever. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's just like I would have preferred if Rey in Star Wars did come from nobodies than being Rey Palpatine's granddaughter. I don't like that. I much prefer the Doctor being basically what he was in Classic Who. I didn't need to know all of his backstory. It makes him less interesting. I never liked the Cartmel Master Plan either, to be fair. The way they thought about going with that, I never enjoyed that either. And I like the Timeless Children even less. And by that I mean I hate it. And then there's the final thing we need to talk about. And that is the media shitstorm that it's going to be every single time a new Doctor is being cast now. If there's one issue I have with the Doctor now being able to regenerate into different genders, different races, etc., 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 it's not actually that itself. You know, I don't have enough time in my life to be bothered by things like that. It's more the media shit show I'm going to have to deal with every time it happens. Every time it's going to be, who's going to be cast? It might be this person. It might be this person. I'm going to have to see 50 million videos on who's going to be cast. None of them will be right. And then I have to listen to the media talk about it. And they'll talk about how it's great and it's diverse, because most of the people don't actually know what that word means now. And then I have to listen to this article talk about why it's a good thing. This article will talk about why it's a bad thing. I have to listen to racist people call other people racist. It's so just... Can I just enjoy this franchise that I love and that I have loved since I was 3 or 4 years old without having to listen to the fan base erupt, and without having to listen to people that aren't even fans of the show put their 2 cents in when they don't even know what they're talking about? All of these articles people are writing of, well, there's a bunch of all these racist white people who are upset that the Doctor's not a white man. First of all, some of these people who are upset, I doubt very seriously every single one of them are white men. I have one of my friends who's not much of a Doctor Who fan, but he hates the new casting. Just because y'all have heard me talk about Eric on the channel before. Eric is a black man. And he doesn't like the casting just because he doesn't like how all of that's cropping up in media now. And he's a black man, and he doesn't like it. I'm sick and tired of hearing people in the media. First off, I don't think everyone, these people are criticizing. Not every single person that doesn't like the Doctor changing gender or colors is a white man either. I'm pretty sure there are black people out there that don't like it. I'm pretty sure there are women out there that didn't like when Whittaker was cast. Because some of these people who have been watching this show for 20, 30, 40, 50, almost 60 years, they have been watching this show for so long that they have a type of ownership over it in their minds. When you love a franchise, you do it mentally in your head, kind of take a partial ownership of it. And when suddenly the lore gets changed 40 or 50 years after the fact, where the Doctor can suddenly start being other genders, other races, etc., etc., because for most of the time the show's run, it couldn't do that. That's really only, I remember it in Death of the Doctor and the Sarah Jane Adventures, and then the Doctor's wife, the first time it really coming up in Doctor Who. Most of the lore, that wasn't a thing. So I think if you've been a fan of this show for 40 or 50 years and you have issue with that, then you have every right to have issue with that and to voice your complaints and critiques. You have the right to criticize about a show that you've been a fan of probably twice as long as some of the people writing these articles have even been alive. You have that right. You know, it's just like fans of Star Wars who were upset about how Luke was portrayed in The Last Jedi. You know, they've been fans of this character for 40 years. They have an attachment to it. They have the right to criticize with what's being done with this character they've identified with forever and ever. And I don't mean identified with because of any particulars, because of the color of his skin or his gender. They identify with because he's a well-written character and that they're Star Wars fans. There are plenty of David Tennant fans, 10th Doctor fans out there that are women, or that are black, or that are Mexican, or that are Asian. Not every single fan of David Tennant's Doctor is a white man. Not every single fan of Patrick Troughton or Tom Baker is a white man. You don't have to have someone on screen the same color as you or the same gender as you to be able to identify with that character, or at least you shouldn't. If you can't identify with someone unless they look like you, that makes you the racist, and you need to go take a hard look in the mirror. But that's what you get labeled as. If you don't like the fact that the Doctor can change genders now, you're a white man. Even if you're not a white man, you're a racist white man. And some of the people writing these articles are very biased. Like, I've read a couple of these articles, and I'm like, this is not written by a white dude. If I can tell by your article, your race and your gender, there's a problem with your article. There's a biasness to your article. And it's every single time a Doctor is cast, we're going to have to deal with that. And a lot of times in these articles, they mention, well, it's so nice to see change in diversity, because before this, it's just been 12 white men. Really? Really? You think just now, with Whittaker and Shooty McGowan, or Gatwa, that you think that's introducing diversity to the casting of the Doctor? Because if you think that, well, then you're a damn fool. Because if you look at the previous 12 Doctors from Hartnell to Capaldi, and all you see is 12 white men, that makes you the racist. Because all you're seeing is skin color. That's all you're seeing is their skin color. Because there's actually a huge diversity in that casting. A huge diversity by the actual meaning of the word diversity. Because the characterizations of all of these incarnations of the Doctor are different. The only thing they have in common is that they're white men. They're very different other than that. Diversity doesn't just mean skin color or gender. Diversity doesn't just mean physical attributes. It can be a way of thinking, of thought. Diversity approaches to so many different things. I keep a diverse amount of stuff in my refrigerator. It's not all just Coca-Cola. Let's take a look at it. Is the first Doctor just like the second Doctor? No. Diversity in the casting of the Doctors in Doctor Who has been around since 1966 when Patrick Troughton was cast. Because Patrick Troughton's Doctor is very different from William Hartnell's Doctor. John Pertwee's Doctor is very different from Patrick Troughton's Doctor. Tom Baker's Doctor is very different from John Pertwee's Doctor. Peter Davison's Doctor is very different from Tom Baker's Doctor. Colin Baker's Doctor is very different from Peter Davison's Doctor, and Sylvester McCoy's Doctor is very different from Colin Baker's Doctor, just going by the classic series. And it continues on to Paul McGann, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, and Peter Capaldi. Peter Capaldi's Doctor is very different from Matt Smith's Doctor. And if you can't see that, it tells me, one, you haven't actually watched the show that you're judging. You especially probably haven't seen the classic series, which is, 2/3 of the show. You don't get to get in my face about what Doctor Who is if you haven't watched 2/3 of the show. I, on the other hand, have seen all of the modern show and most of the classic show. I know what I'm talking about. And there is a huge diversity in the casting of the Doctors in Doctor Who, and there always have been. So if all you see when you look at the Doctors before Whittaker is 12 white men, that makes you the racist asshole. And I've noticed that when I read all of these articles, as soon as I see that line about, well, the previous ones were just 12 white men, I immediately know it's a shit article. Every time. Shit article. And I've seen plenty of these. Whereas on the other hand, these same people who are accusing these white men who are upset because their white male Doctor didn't get cast, immediately turn around and praise the casting of the new Doctor because of his skin color. Or because of his sexual orientation. I'm sitting here going, so you're happy this Doctor was cast because of his skin color. Doesn't that make you racist? By your own logical use of the word, when you were just criticizing somebody about it before. Doesn't that make you sexist? Doesn't that make you sexist because you're happy he was cast because he's a gay man? You don't get to criticize other people and call them racist because of their views on the casting of a Doctor based on skin color, and then get to turn around and express your happiness and joy of the casting of the actor as the character because of his skin color. That's hypocritical. And that's the problem with most of the people writing these articles, is that they're not old enough to have living memory of the 20th century, so they don't know what a dictionary is, so they can't look up the word hypocrisy. And I've seen far too many of these articles. One of them I really just made me shake my head, because it was some woman writing about, seeing all this racism just continues to exhaust me. And then you read the article and you find out she doesn't even watch the show. Doesn't watch the show. She has friends who watch the show. She doesn't watch the show. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how easy is your life if you are exhausted, not tired, exhausted, about people talking about a show that you don't even watch? I don't care too much about shows I don't watch. When I hear somebody talk about Charmed, I don't care, because I don't watch Charmed. You know, and she's like, it continues to exhaust me. The only thing this tells me is that that lady does not have enough problems in my life. Or in her life, excuse me. That lady does not have enough problems in her life. She needs far more problems in her life. I'm like, seriously, lady? You're upset about a TV show you don't watch? That's it? That's what you're writing this article about? You need to find out what actual problems are. What she needs to do is travel back in time. Let's say to the 30s or 40s. Go to a place in Germany. It's called Auschwitz. Make sure you go in there and let them know how bad your life is, how hard it is, and how they're so lucky that they don't have to deal with bigotry and racism the way you do. That's one thing they don't know about there, bigotry and racism. Tell them to count their blessings. Thank God they aren't you, and they just don't have to deal with the hardships of life that you do, because your life is so hard. And that's the thing about these articles that frustrates me. These people do not understand problems. They don't. You can tell. I'm seriously, this is your life. You're complaining about such a minor thing, and it's so hypocritical and one-sided. You do not get to call people these terrible, terrible names just because of their choices, because maybe they're Doctor Who fans from a long, long time, longer than you've been alive, just because they don't agree with casting choices, and then turn around and get to praise the casting choices for the same reasons. Skin color, gender. You know, I think if someone like Ian Levine wants to be upset about the casting of a female doctor, considering how much Ian Levine has done for Doctor Who, which I know is debatable, but still, he's earned the right to do that. He is perfectly entitled to voice his opinion on that without getting buried over it. Whereas, you know, other people who praise the casting of a woman doctor just because she's a female, which is the exact same thing. No, you can't say anything about them at all. You know, they're bulletproof. No, bulletproof. You can't criticize them at all. Heaven forbid. It makes no sense. You don't get to criticize people who are angry about a casting choice because of color and then turn around and praise a casting choice just because of color. That makes you just as bad as they are. Why is it whenever a white person complains about racial casting, it's racist? Whenever a minority complains about racial casting, it's diversity and representation. Seems like a double standard. I, on the other hand, who've actually been on this planet for a while and remember the 20th century very well, I remember when Poison was in the charts, and actually know what these words mean, realize it's all bunk. It is all bunk, and I am so annoyed by the fact that every time a new doctor is coming around, I am going to have to go through this same shit again and again and again. We need another woman doctor. It's time to let another woman doctor. We need a woman of color doctor. Ugh. And of course, if they cast a white man, well, Doctor Who's regressing backwards, and obviously they thought it was an experiment that failed, and so Doctor Who's going back to a white man. These are the same people that are writing these articles complaining about people who are upset about having a non-white doctor and calling them racist. Those are the exact same people who will be screaming racism the next time a white doctor gets cast, a white male doctor. They're the ones who go, oh, that's racist. Yet, you can't win with these people. And the problem is the double standard. And one of the things it boils down to, I've never figured this out. Some of you may have heard this term. It's a term called reverse racism. You know what that means? Nothing. It means nothing. It is a bullshit term. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as reverse racism. Do you know what it is? It's racism. See, people seem to think racism is something only white people do. It's not true. Racism is something anyone can do. I mean, there's white racists out there. There's black racists out there. There's Asian racists out there. There's Mexican. There's racists of everybody out there. And yes, some of these white folks having a fit are probably racist assholes. But by the same token, some of these black people who are having a fit are also racist assholes. Let's just be honest. That's something we haven't managed to get rid of yet, sadly. Reverse racism is a meaningless term which is used to try to make that kind of racism seem like a lesser form of racism. It's kind of like, hey, John, you should come over here. There's some racism going on. Racism? Let me have a look at that. Yeah, look, right down there. There's some reverse racism. Oh, reverse racism. You got me out of the house for that. I thought it was big news. And they invent these terms to try to control the narrative. You see a lot of that in the media, these people trying to control the narrative. You see Star Wars Kenobi going with that. You're dealing with all of that. You see Star Trek dealing with that. You see Doctor Who always dealing with that. And I'm curious to see if, when Gatwa becomes the Doctor, if he's going to get a free pass because of his orientation and his color. If he's automatically going to be praised as one of the best Doctors ever. Because Whittaker gets that sometimes. She gets a free pass. Sometimes just because of her gender. I see lists where people rank the Doctors. And she's like 5th or something on it. I saw one list one time where they were ranking the Doctors and she was in 5th place. And one of the things in the description talking about it was, but as the first woman to play the role, we had to put her here. And I'm sitting here going, they admit it. They put it right in the article. She got 5th place because she has a vagina. That's it. Oh, she's got a vagina. Let's bump her up the list a few spaces. Hey, you want to be remembered one of the best Doctors in Doctor Who? Have a vagina. They put it right on the list. It's a bullshit list, which, to be fair, I knew it was going to be a bullshit list when I looked at the list because it was from worst to best. And the very first one on the list at the worst was Troughton. Immediately when I saw they had Troughton as the worst Doctor ever, I immediately knew it was going to be a bullshit list. Sometimes you can see that when people are ranking Doctors. You see the first one and you go, this is going to be a bullshit list. And it is a bullshit list. But yeah, I'm sick of that. I'm sick of that. That's another thing. I don't watch Doctor Who for all of that. I watch Doctor Who to be entertained. Now, I don't mind the casting choices of Jodie Whittaker and Ncuti Gatwa. I didn't really post much when Gatwa was announced, but that's just because I don't know him. I'm not familiar with him. I've never watched Sexual Education. I'd never heard of him before the casting. And pretty much, this is my reaction anytime a Doctor is cast, because I'm American. You know, I live in the States. I'm not as familiar with British actors. So when Christopher Eccleston was announced as the first Doctor of the modern show, I was like, who's this guy? You know, when he regenerated into David Tennant, I was like, who's this new jerk? I grew to love Tennant. He was my number 2 for a long time. So when he regenerated into Matt Smith, I was like, who's this new jerk? I grew to like Matt Smith. So when Matt Smith regenerated into Capaldi, I was like, who's this old jerk? Now, Whittaker, I actually knew. She's the one time I was familiar with an actor who was just being cast in the role, because I'd seen her in Broadchurch and I'd seen her in that episode of Black Mirror, and I liked her, so I was on board with it. Well, we see how that turned out. So, you know, as soon as Gatwa was announced, my response was, oh, who's this jerk? It has nothing to do with the skin color. I don't know the guy. But you know what? Let's play devil's advocate. Let's do that. Because they want to attack some of these classic fans who aren't as on board with the gender change and the color change. And to be fair, that's not every classic fan. It's not a blanket statement. Some classic fans are fine with it. I don't really have a big issue with it myself. Let's play devil's advocate. Okay. I think classic fans have several spots they can point to say, well, it doesn't make sense. Like, for instance, I've watched a lot of Classic Who. You know what I've never seen? Black Time Lords. Minority Time Lords, really. I don't see them there a lot. The modern show tells us that. Yeah, they're all in it. We see it in the past. We see it anytime he goes to Gallifrey. They're everywhere. But then I go and I look back at Classic Who, and you know what? I don't see them. You know what I see? Bunch of white dudes. Few white women, bunch of white dudes. So if the narrative is, well, Time Lords can regenerate into anything, any person, black, white, blue, whatever. My thought is, really, show me where. Point to Classic Who and show me where they are, because I'm not seeing them. Well, that's just Classic Who, Prowl. Yeah, you know, 2/3 of the show. You know, I don't get these people who make these judgments when they haven't seen most of the show. Like, don't get me wrong. You don't have to watch Classic Who to be a fan of Doctor Who. If you just watch Modern Who and you like Modern Who, That's fine. I'm not going to be one of those people, well, you're not a real fan, you don't watch the classic show. I'm not one of those people. But I do give more credence to people who have seen Classic Who because they know more about what they're talking about. They've seen more of the show. How many TV shows out there do you just watch the last third of? Think about it. How many TV shows are there where you only watch the last third of it and ignore the first 2/3 of it? Not a lot, probably. So in the classic Doctor Who is 2/3 of Doctor Who. So it is something you should watch. But my point is, the people don't criticize people simply because their opinion is different than yours. Just because they're upset because this character that they loved for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years has suddenly been altered fundamentally. I mean, not just the way they can regenerate, but their origin story. And people have issue with that. And they have an attachment to this character because fictional characters matter. You know, you have people like Captain Kirk and Luke Skywalker and Ripley from Aliens. All of these characters who've been around a long time. People have a strong bond with them and they get upset when they feel like these characters are not being treated well. And we see this in fandoms all the time because the people who are making these modern versions of them don't get it. It's why so many people are upset about what's being done with Kenobi. They don't like the way Kenobi's being portrayed. A lot of the upset with Kenobi isn't actually Reva, it's how Kenobi's being portrayed. A lot of people have problems with that. Personally, I'm fine with Kenobi, but a lot of people have problems with that. Just like personally, I'm fine with the Doctor Who casting. I don't like the Timeless Children stuff, but I don't mind the casting. Part of that is because I like Missy. I really like Missy a lot. Like, I'm a huge fan of Missy. She's one of my favorite versions of the Master. And that's probably one of the reasons why I was able to accept the Doctor being able to change genders so easily. It's because I like Missy. That really did make it easier for me when a female Doctor was announced. I don't want to lose Missy. If I had to headcanon in my head that the Doctor can only be a white man, I would lose Missy, and I like Missy. So I didn't have a problem with Whittaker being cast. I didn't really care much for her Doctor, but that's not a gender issue. I don't know Ncuti Gatwa, so I am approaching him with an open mind. I trust Russell, because I love Russell's first era. It's the best era of Modern Who, and one of the better eras of the show. He cast Eccleston, he cast Tennant. They were both fantastic Doctors. He cast really good companions most of the time. Rose was a little hit or miss, depending on the season. But other than that, great companions. So I trust Russell. And I'll continue to trust him until he gives me a reason not to. So I am approaching Ncuti with an open mind. It's just having to listen to all of these hypocritical people online. Look, if your happy or sadness for the casting of the Doctor depends on their skin tone, then you need to take a hard look in the mirror. It's nonsense. You know, if you're one of those people that, all these white men are whining because... And it's other people besides just white men who are whining about the Doctor being able to change color and gender, I assure you. But, all these white men are whining because they don't get their white Doctor anymore. And these are the same people who are sitting there going, oh, yay, diversity, it's nice to have someone that looks like me. You know, if you have to have someone that looks like you to appreciate a character, that makes you the racist. If they have to be the same gender as you for you to appreciate the character, that makes you the sexist. If they have to be the same sexual orientation, that makes you whatever the word for bias that is. That's a you problem. That makes you the racist, you the sexist, you the biased person, and you need to look in the mirror. Like, okay, when you're a child, I understand young children identifying with people that look like them. I was a huge fan of the Fifth Doctor when I was young because my hair parts similar to his. I had blonde hair, it parted to the side, and of course he was the young, cool Doctor with the preppy outfit. I identified with him because he resembled me. I get that as a child. I grew up in the 80s. That's why, boys and girls had very specific toys in the 80s. You know, He-Man, and, girls had the Barbie and stuff like that, and boys had Transformers and He-Man. And they didn't make a lot of female figures in some of the lines, like Silverhawks never got their Melodia figure. I always wanted that. But there were always more male toys than female toys because the male toys sold better because when you're 5 or 6 years old, you identify with things that look like you. That makes sense when you're a child. But you grow out of that, or at least you should grow out of that. And as you get older and you get more mature mentally and emotionally, you learn to accept characters and judge characters based on the character. Like, I enjoy Blade in the Blade movies. He's a well-written, well-acted character. I really like Commander Sisko in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He's a black man, but he is a phenomenal character. He has to deal with stuff no other captains in Star Trek have to deal with. The stuff he goes through during the Dominion War, and the moral choices he has to make, like in that episode, I believe it's In the Pale Moonlight, phenomenal episode of Star Trek. And you look at the compromises and sacrifices he has to make. Sisko is not a great man because of his gender or because of his race. He is a great character. That's why he is a great man. It's because of his character and how well his character is written and performed. Even in the show Viper, there are two main guys in it. One white guy, one black guy. They're both great characters, well-written characters. And so when you get older, you learn to judge characters based on their merits, not on how they look. The problem is some of these people writing these articles still have the mental maturity of a 5-year-old and the emotional maturity of a 5-year-old, and stop projecting onto everybody else. Again, I don't mind. I'm looking forward to the new era. I'm curious to see what we're going to get in the 60th. I love anniversary years. I really enjoyed the 50th. I'm looking forward to the 60th. I don't like the fact that I am going to have to go through this every single time a new Doctor is cast now. But just forever, I guess, or as long as I live. Every time they cast one, oh, it should be a woman. Oh, it should be this. Oh, it should be that. Anything but a white man. I just don't like that. As long as it's a person of color, which is another term I don't like, because it just kind of lumps everybody that's not white into one thing, and that's very disingenuous to minorities, because, you know, Asian people and black people are just as different as black and white people, or white and Asian people, white Mexican people. You know, Mexican and Asian people aren't the same. So I've never liked the term person of color. It seems very unfair to all of the minorities lumped together. It creates an us versus them thing. It's basically white people versus everybody else. And I think that's a very offensive and aggressive term that really shouldn't be used. Everybody deserves their own term. You know, there's white people, there's black people, there's Asian people, there's Mexican people, there's Filipino people, there's all sorts of different cultures and nationalities, and they shouldn't just be lumped in with everyone else as non-whites. I find that offensive. So I've never liked the term people of color, and I don't like when I see it, because it's far too much of a blanket statement. But yeah, I don't know. Doctor Who, I've really got off on a tangent, but Doctor Who, because of all of these things, Doctor Who doesn't feel like Doctor Who to me anymore. Visually, I much prefer the cheaper look of classic Who or early modern Who. The classic villains get way overused in the modern series most of the time, especially the big three. They need to do something about that. I don't like the changes to the canon with the Doctor's origins. I don't like the fact the Doctor is all important to the universe anymore. Plus, I also wish they'd go back to the classic format of just half-hour episodes making up one whole story. That seemed, I feel like that was better paced than the modern show where everything just feels Deus Machina at the end all the time, or at least far too often. And then just all of the stuff with the Doctor Who casting. As someone who is a huge fan of this show, it just gets old. And knowing that I'm going to have to go through this every time is frustrating and irksome, and having to deal with these same people. I hate seeing racist people call other people racist. It's so annoying and frustrating. So that's my thoughts on that. Sorry it got ranty, but I would like to know what you think of this video and what you agree with, what you don't agree with. Again, I'm really big on everybody having their own opinions. I know me and one of my subscribers were talking about that the other day, because she likes the 13th Doctor, and she made a comment of, I guess my opinion don't matter. And I was like, of course your opinion matters. Your opinion always matters. Everybody's opinion matters. You know, just because we have a different opinion, you know, my opinion's not more valid than your opinion, and my opinion doesn't invalidate your opinion. And she was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, you don't have to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. And she's like, oh, I'm just not. She obviously wasn't used to, I think, meeting someone who was as respectful of their opinion as like someone who is respectful of her opinion as I am of my own, because everyone's entitled to their opinion, and everyone deserves to have their opinion respected. And so that's what my comments section is for. I believe as long as you have an opinion that is not antagonistic and, obviously not childish, then you should be able to express that. Other things to do while I have you here. Go ahead, if you've enjoyed this video, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I also have a Patreon. If you like what I do and would like to subscribe to what I do, there's a link to that down in the description below. I try to do an exclusive video for some of my middle tier and up patrons once a week. I don't always manage that. That's what I try to do. But I do have a couple entry level tiers as well. I think my entry level is $2 a month, which it is. I don't know why I'm saying I think. I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you want to send me, and I also have a link to my Amazon wish list, which I update regularly as well. Most importantly, though, thank you for watching.